Record, and let's start by just again retracing our steps. How are you?
How are you?
Doing okay. Let's start by going back to the beginning. So, first thing that we talked about, marriage is divine. And again, we're not going to spend a lot of time. We're just going to kind of clip through this. What does God want for my marriage? Should be the chief question a couple asks. And we're going to talk about that a little bit more today, because today's talk will be on roles and responsibilities for man and woman, and also financial questions, which really revolve around what does God want for my marriage. So if you want a happy marriage, you have to start with that question. 6 adjectives we use to describe this kind of multifaceted character of Christian marriage: mysterious, unitive, monogamous, complementary, indissoluble, and life-creating. So ultimately, we have to be open, God bless you, we have to be open to life if we're going to enter into Orthodox marriage. Then second week, or that same first time, but second half was love and expectations. The principal question was, what is love? Who sang that song, What Has Love Got to Do with It? Baby Don't Hurt Me?
Those are two different songs.
I know, it is, isn't it? What is love, baby don't hurt me? Who sang that one?
Tina Turner.
Oh, okay. What has love got to do with it?
Tina Turner.
She sang both of them?
No.
What's love got to do with it?
That's Tina.
Who sang What is love, baby don't hurt me?
It's just the SNL skit.
It is, yeah. Yeah, no more. What's this thing called love? Achy breaky heart. We can go down the whole list, right? About love. Okay, anyways. So the goal is agape love. What's agape love? Self-sacrificial love. It's the love of what famous verse in the Bible? You see it at a football game tomorrow in the end zone. John 3:16. For God so loved the cosmos. Agape love. It's the kind of love that gives up its life for the other. Agape love defies feelings. So, we all feel in love, at least we probably should feel in love when we're falling in love or getting married. But ultimately, those feelings can fade. And so agape love defies all of that. We talked then the second time about friendship within marriage, friendship being the counterpoint to being a slave. What does it mean to be a friend? A friend knows all things his master is doing. So we don't work for each other. I mean, we do in the sense that we revere each other, we serve each other, but not in a form of slavery, but out of love. And to have friendship means that God has revealed all things to us, and within our marriage, all things are revealed to each other. This can only happen if marriage, especially early on, is nourished. Again, we're just reviewing. We often talked about the challenges we had early on in marriage. If you've been married a long time, maybe you've forgotten about some of these things. If you're just have been married, these might still be real. But these sacred routines help to nourish marriage. Date nights, no kid conversations, marriage bed is not a sleepover area, and setting goals. Okay, I think all of you were here for those 3 parts in the first 2 classes. Communication and conflict, that's how we ended the second class. And so kind of to skip down here, what are the rules for conflict? Recognizing that conflict is not ideal. If we can avoid it, we should avoid it. But also being a realist, Satan is an idealist. Jesus is a realist. Realist says we're going to have conflict. How are we going to work through these things? So don't use divorce as a threat ever. I just talked to someone recently, not from the parish, so don't start thinking, who could that be? But they contacted me, they reached out to me, they're not Orthodox, but interested in Orthodoxy, and began talking about married life, and I sort of began to say, as they described some struggles, well, let me guess, this happens, yes? I said, let me guess, your spouse uses divorce as a threat, and this person started laughing and said, yeah, almost weekly. Like, well, just get our child or our children to the age of 18 and then we're done. So we can't ever use it as a threat, because someday the other partner might say, okay, don't ever be physically abusive, don't be verbally abusive, no name calling, don't constantly interrupt, wait your turn, don't involve others in the conflict like your friends, your parents, especially parents, other parishioners, don't get in the corner and say you wouldn't believe what Ted did yesterday. Because we all know that's not true. We all know Ted. He wouldn't do those things. Okay? Right, Ted?
Sure thing.
Yeah, that's right.
Yep.
Don't withhold sex as a form of punishment. Don't bring up the past as a way to demonstrate an inability to change. You've always been like this. Don't generalize. Don't let the sun go down in your anger. Don't bring children into it. Don't fight in front of others, especially children. Don't continue if you're too weary. Don't reject compromise. Don't give up and withdraw to separate areas. For example, separate areas of the house, I can't imagine, I don't think Matushka's here, I don't remember a single time in our marriage where there may have been times where the conflict went on late into the night or early into the morning, but never a time where I said, well, I'm sleeping on the couch, because that is the first step toward everything else kind of falling apart. Last week then, sex and romance, and I think I told you, those of you who are here, did you listen to it? Well, I shouldn't put you on the spot. Yes. Good. Did you listen to it? Good. Okay. So I think I said 3 or 4 times, go ahead and blush once because it can be a little uncomfortable, but no one's going to tell you about these things but the church. And if the church doesn't tell you, I don't know why a church would not speak openly, in the right context, openly about some of these things, because it's the very heart of our life together. So when it comes to love, this is usually the pattern. Again, this is from last time. Eros, which is romantic love. Philia, which is friendly love. Storge, which is familial love, like now you're part of the family with each other, to agape love. And even physically and biologically and emotionally, we do change over time, right? The romantic feelings we used to have may not be present in the same way, but agape love takes over and is much stronger than erotic or romantic love. This is all reflected in the prayers of the crowning service. By the way, I'll say, I had a priest contact me because 2 of his parishioners are coming to the wedding tomorrow. And this kind of stuff drives me crazy. I know what he's getting at because I know his perspective. And he said, I have 2 parishioners who want to come to the crowning. Now, there are 2 ways to do Orthodox weddings if people have already been married civilly or in another denomination. One way is you just do the prayers of crowning, you put the crowns on their heads, and you say you're married. But we don't do that with any other mystery. We don't, at baptism, say, you were baptized Presbyterian, we're just going to bring you to the font and dunk you in the water. We do the exorcisms. We bring you in as a catechumen. We say all the prayers. So I have always done the entire marriage service. Partly because the prayers are beautiful and the prayers speak to having children, having a chaste family life, being in love in this agape, self-sacrificial love. And I know this priest, and this priest doesn't do it that way. And so he wrote back, happy crowning. And I so wanted to write back and say, that's not what we do here. But I thought, what would Matushka have me do? And she would say, don't engage. So I just gave a thumbs up, thank you, okay? But the prayers of the entire service, and by crowning I mean marriage, I don't mean just the rite of crowning, ask for several things. Chastity, so a bed unassailed, it says, children and concord of soul and body, and that ultimately husband and wife be of one flesh. And so then, as we talked about last time, what was the reason that God gives for sexual intercourse? To tame the passions, particularly lust, although other passions can be tamed, anger, things like this, to the procreation of children, to unite husband and wife deeply and concretely, as the High Roman Gregorio says, to face the struggles of family life. And then there are certain unnatural things that are strictly prohibited in marriage: pornography, oral sex, masturbation, inappropriate or animalistic acts, intercourse in preparation for the divine liturgy. This also applies to fast days, so Wednesdays and Fridays. Historically, Christians have abstained in preparation for the fast, for example, and then intercourse with the full intention of not conceiving. Because then, as Father Josiah has said, and it's true, then it makes the spouses, in a way, no different than prostitutes. It's just you haven't paid for it, because there's no intention on conception. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon. How old are you? I was going to say, how old are you? Come on in. How are you? So there's no intention. No, not you, Matushka. Longes, pull up 2 seats, okay? So when there is this marital act, there has to be at least the openness to conception. What has led to this? Again, these inappropriate things, that's kind of how we wrapped up last time, principally the use of pornography by men and women. I just heard, I was listening yesterday as I was doing some work in my office at home, because we had a AC problem, which $355 later got worked out. I should have called Ted. It was just a clog in the... I know, Ted, you're my go. I'm not doing anything else without consulting you first.
There's another guy who's actually an air conditioning guy. Isn't there?
There is, but
Or
it's...
his father is, yeah.
Yeah, but that's Peter, and his brother's getting married today, and I figured it was not a good idea to call him the day before his brother's wedding and say, hey, can your dad come out and work? So I was working from home waiting for the AC guy to come out, listening to a moral theologian from the Catholic Church who teaches at a medical school, which is what interested me, talking with Tucker Carlson. And he was talking about infanticide and how, what's the question that's being raised in this next election. And then he launched into talking about how brain death is not really a category of death, at least in moral theology, which I 100% agree with. In fact, I wrote him offline and we had a very nice conversation because we were both in the same kind of business, which is working for hospitals in the capacity of doing ethics work and from a theological perspective, and how brain death is really a product of the organ donation industry, and we can talk about that another time. The point is, at the very end of this, Tucker Carlson said, do you think we can ever be unaddicted to our phones? And he made the point of saying it was easier for him, Tucker Carlson, to give up smoking cigarettes and drinking, which is a hard thing to do, than it was to give up his phone, which he still has not been able to do. And they talked about how people are so addicted to their phones, and often that's how pornography happens. And this is what was interesting. He mentioned a study, Tucker Carlson did, that he had read where women, because of the rise of pornography, have actually been injured because in this act of having sex, replicating pornographic things, they're actually being choked to death. Now, here was the stunning statistic. He said that the research shows it is the women who have watched pornography more and have asked for this in the sexual encounter than men. So I think the old, all I'm trying to demonstrate is the old kind of notion that, men do this and women don't, is no longer applies today. I can tell you from, just hearing confessions here and other places. I mean, when I go other places, they say, can you get in line and hear confessions? The rise of pornography is equal among men and women. Okay, this is not strictly a male problem. Yes?
So, as somebody who takes confessions, do you feel like the confessions have changed over time and that more disturbing things have been, do you feel like they're becoming more disturbing over time and harder to maybe?
Yes, I think also the things that come with watching pornography, for example, are much harder to break. Whether that be more disturbing things or just, I can't break the cycle of watching and then self-abuse. It's really hard because it's so ingrained in our minds. And you know from seeing any images that are inappropriate, whether they be of that nature or not, it's really hard to unsee those things. You know, you can't ever unsee
Well,
that.
I think the access is easier than it ever was before.
That's right. Yep. So we have to be very careful. So this I think has led to so much of this, because all these things that I just described as inappropriate, and you all know what they are all found in the life of pornography. Okay? So, as we ended we didn't end last time. We went to children and parenting. You might be thinking, why does the priest want to get in my bedroom? I don't, I promise. But Satan does, and so the church needs to at least have a voice in that realm. Okay? We ended then by children and parenting. Some principles of parenting guided by the work of St. John Chrysostom. Teach obedience in matters of faith and safety. So if your kid's going to walk across the street, you don't say, now let's talk about why you want to walk across the street. You grab them by the arm and you say, don't do that, you're going to hurt yourself. The whole idea that, we need to be hands-off with our kids when it comes to safety is detrimental and dangerous. But acquiescence in non-essential matters. So there are some things, if your kid says, I want to draw with red marker, not purple marker, and you're going to let them play with markers, don't fight over, is it red or purple? If you believe that this cat your kid is drawing needs to be orange, because that's the color the cat really is, and your daughter or son says, I want to draw it blue, let them draw it as blue. It doesn't matter. Okay? If you want to wear shoes that make a lot of noise, you don't fight it. You just say, okay, we're going to curve that a little bit. We're going to acquiesce on some things. But if she wears those shoes and taps across West Chicago, he better go running for it. Okay? Parents are responsible for the theological upbringing of their children. This is critical. And it's funny, I can always tell when I send something to those of you who are on the Telegram group that strikes a chord, or that you might think that's a little outrageous, because there's zero reaction. And when I sent yesterday the prophetic words of St. Paisios, that World War III is coming, and you better be ready, and if you don't believe me, just watch the news. Well, don't watch the news because they're lying to you. But if you don't believe me, talk to someone who lives in the Middle East, and they will tell you what you heard in all of this stuff with Iran sending bombs to Israel was, oh, thank God, none of them really came close to hitting anything important. What I know from Archbishop Damaskinos, who lives in Tel Aviv, right outside, is that a missile landed and didn't explode at the gate to the monastery where I stayed 18 months ago. Now, the news is not going to tell you that, because they don't want you to get any ill impression of what's happening there. The point is, you have to be ready, because the Holy Fathers now, and our most recent fathers, have been very clear that the end is drawing nigh. So, parents, you're responsible for bringing your children up. That's why I included that icon of the demons trying to lull a new young couple back to sleep. Like, oh, it's Sunday morning, just keep sleeping, right? Oh, there's a liturgy today. No, you're really tired. You've worked really hard. When you hear that voice, I'm not going to put Christ first. That's the voice of the demons. And my point about parents being responsible is your kids see that. Your kids see that. So they will, if you think, my 2-year-old or my 3-year-old doesn't know that mommy and daddy are skipping church, they know. My kids, it's so funny now because almost every day they say, is today a church day? And then the next question is it a communion day? Because they know they're going to fast differently than if it's not a communion day. But parents, I'm telling you, you cannot expect that bringing your kids here for 2 hours a week or 4 hours a week is enough for them to leave your house and be equipped to meet whatever is coming. The home has to be a domestic church. We're going to talk about that more today, as the husband is the domestic priest, the domestic pastor. Children have to come third. So Christ is always first. Christ has to be the center of the family. Your marriage has to be second. Go back. Your marriage has to be second. and your children have to come third. And again, in talking to couples who have struggled in their marriages, two things always happen. I think I drew this out for you last time. It has to be Christ, and then your marriage, and then your children. Often what happens is your marriage becomes the focus, and Christ becomes second. And when this order gets out of order, then quickly your children become first. And you see this by, not only skipping church to do things with your kids, but at the expense of marital happiness and joy, because then your spouse begins to say, you're never home. You're with your kids at a baseball game, at this event, at this thing, at that thing. At the end of the day, Christ has to be first. This is the gospel reading for tomorrow. And I know, I realize that many people will tell you many things, but just listen to what Christ says. They have the miraculous catch of fish. And he says, come and follow me. So there's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. It has to be number one. Emma, take the kids. So roles and responsibility. Any questions about any of that? That's all from last time. Have you been able to do any of the exercises together? You have? Been able to talk about it a little bit? Okay. No questions about any of that. You're good. Good. Where did Longinus go? Matrushka, go find Longinus, Sophie. So this next section on roles and responsibilities, we are going to talk kind of some of the differences between. I know who it is. We're going to talk about some of the differences that are required of men and women within marriage. Some of the different roles, some of the different responsibilities. And some of this you may say, oh my gosh, I can't believe that's what the church thinks. Some of it you may say, that makes total sense, I've seen it work. And some of it you may say, I know the church says that, but I really need to work on that. Okay? So first things first. Contrary to what we hear in the world today, men and women are Come sit down. Oh, go. Men and women are different. Okay? I just talked, I won't, to my daughter about something at school. Doesn't matter, but the point is, schools are not going to teach your kids that men and women are different. They are different. Men and women are complementary. When roles and responsibilities are properly balanced, marriage is blessed and settled on the royal path. What do I mean when I say the royal path? What does that mean? What is the royal path? Yeah, so it's the path that follows behind the king. That's why it's royal. Who's the king? Christ is the king. So it's the path that always follows behind Jesus Christ. Now, it's foolish and inaccurate to believe that men and women are identical physically, neurologically, and emotionally. And I think it's important to say this because there's a generation, even of very good Christian people, who would believe, men and women are different physically, but not neurologically and emotionally. Right? I mean, this gets back to the old question of, can women be as good at math and science as men can be at other things? There's a whole generation of people that say, don't talk that way. Men and women can be identical neurologically and emotionally. Certainly not physically, because we're different. But clearly, if you know anything about psychology, neurological studies, physical studies, men and women are very different in all three categories. Yes?
I learned recently that the international rules for chess, for competitive chess, do not allow men and women to compete against each other because
Interesting, yeah.
of the psychological, men are, I'm going to just mow you over.
Yeah, yep.
Women there. So
Yeah.
men and women cannot compete in chess.
Interesting. In fact, if you read this section from Father Josiah's book, he talks about some of the attributes that are common to men and women, which are different, which the world will say, don't talk about that, that's not true, but are really clearly defined. Men are that sort of, I'm going to mow you over, is... Who is that?
Unless you're two.
Unless you're two.
And then it doesn't matter.
That's right. So they are very different. Okay, they are very different. Man is incomplete without woman, physically, neurologically, emotionally. And woman is formed from the very life of man, and to be complementary for complementarity with man. And this is also another thing. Remember, who is made out of Adam and Eve? Who is made in God's image? Adam is. And Eve then is formed from the image and the side of Adam. Okay? God does not make Adam and then do the same thing with the dirt and make Eve. He makes Adam in his image, and from his image, Adam, from his side, he makes Eve. Okay? So, woman is formed from the very life of man. Now, what incident in the Gospels gives you a picture into how God is remaking us in this same way as Adam and Adam's side and Eve coming forth? What image in the Gospels? What event? I'll give you the hint. It's the life of Christ, and it's after his crucifixion. What happens? Before that,
They pierce his
they
side.
pierce his side. They pierce his side. And what comes out when they pierce his side? Blood and water, which is like a new birth, right? You have babies, there's blood and water. It's the new birth out of Christ's side giving birth to what? The new Eve, which is the church. Okay? So, woman is formed from the very life of man. Man is incomplete without woman. Literally, a part of him makes her. And she is incomplete because her fulfillment, her image, is in man himself. So, Ephesians 5, which we read at every wedding. Again, I told you the story a couple times ago about, the bride and groom who came to me and said, I can't say submit like the day of the wedding. And I had already signed the marriage license, which was a big mistake. Never do that again. They said, I can't say that. And many people even get a little bristly when you read this Ephesians 5. In fact, we used to have a priest here who, when he would do the wedding service, would actually take out the one verse that said, wives, submit to your husbands. Because from his perspective, that was not the way we think in the world anymore. I could just take it out. Okay? So, I'm going to give you here Ephesians 5, but I've reordered it because I'm giving you here in blue the responsibility of women, here in red the responsibility of men, or husbands, wives and husbands, and here in the middle what is common to both. What responsibility do we both have? In real time, this section actually comes before the wives. But I want you to see this kind of as bookends to this Orthodox marriage, okay? That should say brethren, not Bethrin. So, wives, submit yourselves unto your own husbands, as unto the Lord. So, just pause right there. This as unto is very important. Wives, submit yourselves unto your own husband, as unto the Lord. What does that mean? You're going to submit yourselves to your husband in the same way that you were already, or should already be, submitting yourselves unto the Lord. So you have to pause if you're a wife here and say, am I submitting myself to the Lord? That's presupposed in all of this. If I'm not submitting myself to the Lord, how can I ever submit myself to my husband? This makes sense? You all look like you need a big glass of coffee. You okay? You got it? Okay. We're all out of K-cups. I had to get a big one coming in.
Oh, I have one in my trunk in my hand right now.
Well, when you're all done, bring that thing in. Yeah. I need an IV before we go to vigil, okay? Wives, submit yourselves unto your husbands as unto the Lord, meaning you're going to do both. You're submitting yourself to your husband in the same way that you will to the Lord. Now, I'm going to give you the punchline first. This is like telling the end of the joke without the joke part. Every time I have seen a woman, a wife, have trouble submitting to her husband, she does not have a proper relationship with the Lord to begin with. The real issue is not, I don't submit to my husband. The real issue is, I don't even know how to submit to the Lord. Yeah.
I think that is a huge problem with Protestantism, personally, because that's your relationship with Christ is already disordered from the beginning.
Yeah, right?
And so your life really can't get to the correct order in other ways.
Yes. But we can't accept that as the end.
No, I know.
Yeah, but it is a struggle. It's a hurdle because in fact, I'm going to say this in a second. Submit is the sort of biblical equivalent to obedience. And as much as a good Protestant wants to say, I'm obedient to Christ, from the very beginning, they're not, right? Baptize all nations. We'll baptize you when you get older. Take, eat, this is my body. It's not really his body, right? So we take what Jesus says and say, I know better. Most Protestants. And so from the very beginning, we don't know how to submit to Christ because we're not obedient to him. So why would we ever be able to be obedient to someone else?
To kind of extend that, I find it very interesting that people who need to go to church to get something out of it tend to be the most lost as far as what's really.
Absolutely. Because the relationship with Christ becomes transactional. And the minute I don't get something, the minute I don't get something, what was that?
There's a B under there.
Oh, the minute I don't get something, then I leave, right? Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to ask this question because I have a friend who is in a really, she was not Orthodox,
Yeah.
but how does this relate to situations where, and this is not the case in my marriage, I'm just saying.
We know, yeah.
The husband is like tyrannical, he's
Yep.
making really bad decisions,
Yep.
and you're a wife in a situation where you know he's not making the right decisions.
Yes.
What do you do as the woman?
I'm going to answer that in just a second,
thank
okay? If I don't answer it as explicitly as you want, ask again,
Yeah,
okay? But I'm going to bring up, what if you have a bad husband?
Okay.
What happens, okay? So from the get-go, though, this is so important. So wives, people who are going to get married, the key is, man, you got to develop a relationship with the Lord first. One where you are submissive and obedient to Christ. If Christ says, follow me, and I know it seems like such a small thing, but again, tomorrow's gospel, think about what they do. Peter, James, and John, miraculous catch of fish. They drop their nets, they get rid of their boats, they leave their father and their family, and they follow. And the question I'm going to ask is, how many of you are willing to do the same thing? I mean, if they came to you and said, sell your car, leave your job, leave your family, you're never going to speak to them again, come follow me, how many of us are willing to do that? But see, no, I agree. But now factor in you have kids. Now factor in you have a spouse. Now factor in I have a really good job that makes a lot of money. Right? It's not so easy. Actually, this is why the fathers talk about having less makes it easier. Okay? There are certain things I would have been much more willing to give up 20 years ago that now I would like to think I'd still give them up, but it would be much more difficult. But it's funny because Matushka and I talk a lot about this, how so much of our life, literally every day, is that doesn't matter because that's not who we are. That doesn't matter, we don't need that. That doesn't matter, this comes first. That doesn't matter if we miss that. Who cares if we don't go to that game? We need this. That's part of this, Augustine, this change in Orthodox marriage we were talking about. But are we willing to follow? If you don't follow Christ, you're never going to follow a husband. Right? It's totally incompatible with married life. For the husband is the head of the wife, even as Christ is the head of the church. As the church is subject unto Christ, so is the church, we submit to Christ, so let the wives be to their own husbands in everything. What does it mean to be subject? To be subject to Christ. Let's talk about the church. Right as we were talking about women be subject to your husband, you walk in. God bless you. How are you? Good. God bless you. So what does it mean to be subject to Christ as the church? What does that mean?
To be willing to die.
Okay, so the first thing is to be willing to die. So if you're subject to your master, like if you're, in the army and you're subject to your commander, that means I'm willing to die. If the commander says go, I go. What does it mean as the church to be subject to Christ? It means what he commands, I do. Plain and simple. Now, the good thing is he commands nothing, as the scriptures say, that are impossible. But if he were to say, it's the old phrase, you say jump and I say how high. That's exactly the relationship that the church has with Christ. If Christ commands it, I do it. Why? Because I'm subject to him, to the church. To Christ. And in real time as the church, now I'm not talking about in your marriages, in the church, this involves things like how we pray. Again, I still get people that say to me, I can't believe you serve vigil on Saturday nights. Why do we do it? This is very, very simple. The church in her rules tells us that when we have a divine liturgy, we precede it by vespers and matins. That's the rule. So anything outside of that is not being subject to the church, who is Christ. Okay? It tells us how we eat. It tells us how we live. It tells us how we spend our money. Right? It tells us when we do certain things. When we pray. As we talked about earlier, when we have marital relations. When we don't. This is all how the church is subject to Christ. Now what St. Paul says is, wives, if they understand this relationship, which as St. Paul says in the epistles is not burdensome, if they understand that relationship, then they can understand properly how to relate to their husbands, because the husband is the head of his wife, even as Christ is the head of the church. So let the wives be to their own husbands in everything. Okay, Mary?
It sounds so legalistic when it's just written out the way you have it. I find that when it's burdensome is because I have forgotten that I love God, that God wants me to love him.
Yeah.
That it's not a transaction like
Yeah.
and even that the soldier will be obedient, but when the commander has the heart of the man, that's when it's not burdensome.
That's
They
right.
may do it grudgingly.
That's right.
But willingly is different than.
You've all seen the movie Gladiator, I'm guessing? Like the very opening scene where they're going to war and Russell Crowe is rallying the troops. They all understand that he has their heart. He shares their passion, but he also has their back. And he knows, he says, if we die today, we'll be in, Elysium or something, which is the everlasting life. But none of them says, I'm not going. Because the leader has demonstrated, I will lead you into battle. Okay? So, you're right. Part of the reason, this is actually a good connection to marriage. It's analogous. In the church, if you don't have someone who leads in these things, the people will never follow. Then it becomes burdensome. If your priest says, well, I don't really pray a lot, but you should. I don't confess, or I confess once a year, but you should go every 4 weeks, or you see the priest is not fasting. Well, then this becomes burdensome. Like, why would I do these things? Same thing in a marriage. If a husband says, let's live this way, and then he doesn't, he says, Masha, we can't spend money this way. Come on, we can't do that. You can't spend money on these frivolous things. And then he comes home and says, oh, by the way, I stopped and got this watch that I can't afford because I'm the man. That's not how this thing works. Okay? The church is subject to Christ because Christ does all of this himself as well. Wives, be subject to their own husbands in everything. Now, we'll go down here to husbands and we'll come back to what's common to both of us. Husbands, love your wives even as Christ also loved the church. What do you think the Greek word is there for love? Eros, philios, storge, or agape? Agape. Husbands, agape your wives, even as Christ also loved the church. So, the also or even as For wives, you love your husbands as you love the Lord. And for husbands, love your wives as Christ loved the church. That's my kids. I love them. And gave himself for her, that he might, listen to what he says, sanctify. What does sanctify mean? Sanctus, agios, make holy. So Christ loves the church and he makes her holy, cleanses her, so she was dirty, the church, with the washing of water by the word, that's baptism, that he might present her to himself a glorious church, not having spot or wrinkle or any such things, but that it should be holy and without blemish. So ought men to love their wives as their own bodies. He that loveth his wife loveth himself. For no man ever yet hated his own flesh, but nourisheth and cherisheth it, even as the Lord the church. Let every one of you in particular love his wife, even as himself. So just by sheer word count, who has more words? Wives or husbands? Husbands, okay? And by risk of death, who has more? Wife or husband? Husband, okay? Now, we'll talk about both of these in just a second. But then what's common to both of us? St. Paul says, brethren, so he's talking to wives and husbands, give thanks always for all things unto God, the Father, in the name of the Lord Jesus, submitting yourselves one to another in the fear of God. And this submission here is a reverence toward each other. Like, as we talked about a few minutes ago, man is incomplete without woman. Woman is formed from the life of man. She is incomplete without man. Why do we reverence each other? Because we're not whole without each other. When I see Matushka, I should see the one that makes me complete. And this does happen practically as you get older. There are things now, she can look at me and say, I know exactly what you're thinking. Right? Or she'll say to the kids, you know, this is what Dad means. I don't have to say it, she knows it. Because we are incomplete without the other. So what does this look like in real time, practically? So wives, there is a deeper, more unique submission that St. Paul lays out for wives. It's deeper than just revering. I mean, all of you, I think, have reverence for your spouse if you're married. Right? Like, I'm a woman, I deeply revere my husband, he's a good man. You know, nobody here is saying, he's a laparche, I don't like him, I can't believe I married this guy, I don't like him at all. Right? You're all here and I know all of your stories. You have deep reverence for your spouses. But there's something deeper here that St. Paul lays out. This submission, as we said up there, could be called obedience. And remember, though, if Christ and the church are the model, obedience does two things. Obedience is always a gift. So pause. I have a spiritual father that I can say what you recommend. And if he says, do this, and I disagree, but I realize he's giving me something to do, to me, that's a huge relief. Because what? I'm no longer responsible, short of doing what he's asked me to do. So unless it's something completely outrageous, that is antithetical to Christ and the church, I say thank you very much. Because obedience is a gift. It means somebody else is taking the responsibility. And as the church has always said for this reason, obedience is salvation. If you want to be saved as an Orthodox Christian, it comes through obedience. Obedience in whatever relationships you have been given. So, if you're married in this room and you're an Orthodox Christian, what are those relationships? You're obedient to Christ. Who else are you obedient to? Spiritual father, the church, and your spouse. Okay? And of course, none of these three should ever give anything that is antithetical to Christ. If I say to Mary, oh, for your penance, you need to go out and sell that car you've got and sell the piano, and you were kind of mean to Matushka, so you need to take all the money and buy her a nice watch, and we'll do, that's your penance. You'd say, whoa, whoa, whoa. That's antithetical to Christ. That's not what Christ says. But now if I say to Mary, your penance is, you need to pray every day for the rest of your life for that person that you offended, that's not antithetical to Christ at all, who says pray without ceasing. Okay? So, these are the people to whom we are obedient. And again, if you as a woman, for example, understand obedience to Christ, to your priest, to the church, obedience to your husband is very easy. It's just an extension of that relationship. Different aspect, but the same kind of thing. Because, again, it's a gift, it's where your salvation is, and the person to whom you are obedient is with you in the fight. Okay? Is with you in the fight. So to get back, not to pick on Mary, but you're with. But if I give, again, as obedience to a spiritual father, if I say to Mary, do this penance, I don't just send her on her way and never think about her again. In fact, when I'm praying for all of you, my prayers for Mary intensify because I know she's in the midst of this struggle. So the spiritual father is with you in the fight. The church is with you in the fight. Your husband is with you in the fight. What's the fight? The fight is to gain salvation. The trouble is that obedience has been all but rejected in our culture today. If you walk outside these doors and say, you should be obedient to anyone but God, and even that's questionable, they're going to say you're crazy. Right? The whole message of the Western world is nobody's going to tell me what to do. Yes?
I just wanted to say from a practical point of view, if you have like a disagreement, there's option A and option B, and two smart people, both options are more or less the same, you could spend a little while talking about what is better, what is not, and ultimately just picking one option out of the two quickly might be the best decision.
Mm-hmm.
There's not a lot of differences. So
Absolutely.
If it's, just having a rule, it wouldn't even really matter who would make the pick, but just having a rule saying this person's going to be the final decision. And then the other person gets to saying, well, I didn't really decide that, so we're in charge of the consequences as well, right? So there's a lot of that, I think, of when we made the point about meeting yourself, where you're relieved of, if your boss tells you to do something and then he goes wrong, he's the right guy responsible. It's not
That's right.
You do your job. So.
I think this is why a functioning, healthy parish community is the model for our own families. So if you have a priest, for example, in a parish that is a tyrant and never asks anybody what they think he should do and makes every decision from what happens in the liturgy to the size of the coffee cups because, by God, it's his way or the highway, well, then people in your parish are going to have marriages that look like that. But if the parish is a functioning community where there's a dad who has to make the decisions because he's responsible, but gets the input of others, right? And says, what do you think? Mary, should we spend $3,000 on the landscaping or $1,500? At the end of the day, someone's got to make the decision, but I want to hear what she thinks. I want to hear what Yelena thinks. I want to hear what Matushka thinks. And if it's something to do with moms and babies, I'm not going to ask you. I want to hear what moms think. If it's something to do with, hey, should we have an event for the young guys to watch a football game? I'm going to talk to Isaiah. But if that is modeled in the parish and modeled between the priest and the Matushka, very publicly, that then can filter down to other people. Okay? So the trouble is, often obedience has been rejected in our culture. People who don't know how to obey Christ, the church, or the priesthood really don't know how to obey within a marriage. St. Paul is imploring wives to respect and obey their husbands. And this, we've got to get your wife for when she comes back. Even when their husbands are not respectable. Okay? Respect and obey even when your husband is not respectable. Now, I want to pause and say, that does not mean my husband's beating me up at night or pushing me against the wall or calling me names and emotionally and verbally abusing me, but I still need to be really good to him because, by God, respect the unrespectable, the non-respectable. That's not what this means.
That
Okay?
was the situation.
Yeah. That's very different. If your own safety is at risk, you've got to remove yourself. Now, I will say, That doesn't mean you go the next day and file for divorce. I would like to see couples who have some struggles like that spend a little more time separated working through things, because we can be healed. Not always, but we can be healed. But if your husband's just not being a good guy, you still have to respect him. In fact, this is St. Paul again, this is not, or St. Peter, this is not Father Joshua. It's often through the respect of a wife toward her unbelieving or disrespectful husband that wins him over. So sometimes, if I talk to women who, and this happens a lot of times in the old country, somebody grew up Russian, somebody was Russian, and they grew up in the church, and their spouse did not, and they continue to grow in their faith, and their spouse wants nothing to do with it. Well, what do I do? How often do I upset the apple cart? How often do I say to my husband, I'm going to church, we're not going to go to the lake house this weekend? At some point, you have to concede to your husband and say, it's not what I want, but I'm going to respect him even when he's not respectable. Because as St. Peter says, we can win him over. What happens in our culture today, given all we've been taught by the world? When your husband is not respectable, what does the world say you should do? Leave, or before you leave, humiliate him. Exactly right. Make him feel like he's nothing. And how does that happen in real time? You yell at him, you get in his face, you talk bad about him to the kids. You may not be hitting him, but you're making it clear this guy is not a good human being. Okay?
Father,
Yes?
aren't modern marriages set up for failure because a lot of it, and it's reinforced by media, movies, and music and stories, is it's all about how it makes you feel or what your spouse does for you.
Yeah.
And how much they throw off the stupid husband, and how under-evaluated the woman is. And I can really say, just from experience, it really poisons your ability to be able to do that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the entire culture of Instagram is my husband's an idiot.
Yeah.
Right? Or I'm the abused wife. Well, how are you abused? Well, I had to vacuum today. That's the whole culture that we see is basically, I feel disrespected, therefore I will disrespect in return. And in this case, two wrongs don't make a right. In fact, it only makes it impossible to be saved. See, now this happens, Masha. I was talking about wives, you walk out. Now I'm going to talk about husbands, and Augustine's gone. Where is he? Augustine, there you are, okay.
Okay, question to follow up. So what if the husband specifically behaving in a way where the kids are being led away from Christ? Demonstrating behaviors and what what would you do next?
So give me an example of the behavior you're talking about.
I don't know, general disrespectful human life. Let's say, saying, hey, let's say this thing, so let's demonstrate these behaviors that, dangerous, let's just say, to older people.
Yeah.
Showing your kids some bad movies.
Yeah. So it's very hard because it's sort of like the old relationship that sort of babushkas would have under the Soviet yoke, where their husbands would go off to work and they would get out their icons and begin to pray kind of secretly and silently. If it's a husband who's leading his children astray, wives really have to, in secret, redirect what their kids are seeing and doing. Now, it's hard with movies, because what are you going to say? Oh, you watched that movie, we shouldn't watch that. But you can fill the void of those negative things with positive things. And more than anything, I think it's St. Piusius, we've talked about this before, says, more than talk to your children about what is right or about God, is pray to God about your children. But again, this is why, and this happens in Orthodox marriages, of course, but it happens more in marriages where people are unequally yoked. So I'm not going to say never, but I have no intention of doing weddings here for people that are unequally yoked. Because at some point you'll run into that. At some point, the rubber will meet the road, and the question will be, will we follow Christ or not? That's already a struggle in Orthodox marriages. So it's very hard when that's not the foundation. How do you avoid this? Well, I think you have to choose your spouse wisely. You know, you have to, and sometimes you don't. Yeah, second time's a charm, right? She got it right this time. This is good. You got to choose wisely, and if you find this is not the person I thought I married, then you gotta get to work on that right away. Because if it gets too far down the road, it's never going to turn around. Yeah.
Okay, so have you ever had a situation where an Orthodox couple, you felt like there was no way that like the husband and the wife can stay married, like it was just like long gone. Maybe they were going to counseling for you or something like that. Maybe severe abuse where the husband's just not getting better and understanding his role. Have you ever had a situation like that where you were like, okay, I think this is...
Yes, 2 situations, and in looking back, in neither case was I specifically asked for my opinion.
Okay.
I was informed, and I think there was looking for some validation. In one case, I thought it was completely justified.
Okay.
In the other case, I thought there should have been more work done.
Okay.
Both of them had already gotten to a point, though, where this was inevitable, and there's not much I could do. Again, it's sort of like when people go to confession. The joke is when you go, yes, exactly, or you save whatever is your big sin for the very end to try to sort of sneak it in, like, I wasn't nice to my husband, I did this. And by the way, I had an affair. Okay, forgive me, Father. You're like, whoa, what? What happened? No, nobody cares about it. I'm not saying that. My point is, you save the big things for the end to sort of sneak it in. We do the same thing when we have marriage problems. We make it sound like everything's great, and then when it's all falling apart, we sneak in, this is not going to work out. So we need very early on to be engaged with your spiritual father if you need actual marriage counseling, which is, it can be hit or miss. I totally get it, but I think your default needs to be try it and talk to your priest about it. Because sometimes it's very practical, like we can't communicate very well.
So I've been thinking about this for a long time. There was a Russian Orthodox priest YouTube video where he really talks down on psychologists.
Yeah.
Which is a young guy. I think if I emailed him, I could convince him otherwise. Because the thing is, priests are already so busy that I feel like, there has to be some sort of relationship between maybe Orthodox psychologists and priests, because there's no way humanly possible a priest can do, be a psychologist to every single one.
Yeah, and
it's too much.
Exactly, and they're very different things. So if you come with marriage problems, the priest's job is to figure out, is this something psychological, like you're a narcissist,
Right.
or you're got terrible anxiety and think less of your, or is it a spiritual problem? Now, those can be spiritual problems, and I think that the default is always we try to solve them spiritually. You confess, we work on a penance, we work on your spiritual life, but sometimes it's just, I'm a narcissist and I need to talk to a real psychologist about what's going on.
Yeah.
The trouble is, priests like to do psychology when they're not trained, and psychologists like to do priest stuff when they're not trained.
Right.
And I hear all the time people say, well, I talked to my psychologist and they recommended this. And again, if they would ask me, what do you think? I'd say, that's antithetical to being an Orthodox. But they often don't ask. They just say, this is what I'm going to do. Yeah.
Is there such thing as like an Orthodox registry where like you can find any service?
Yeah.
I know this is kind of off topic, but it would be super helpful to find
There is
Orthodox
that,
professionals.
yeah, what's I was part of it, the medical clergy group. It's not all clergy, but it's like, I gave a paper at their conference. What was the name of that thing? I forget the acronym, but there is a registry there are a few in Michigan actually, that are Orthodox trained psychologists. Now, do they accept all insurance? I don't know, but.
The canonical.
Yeah, the not the USCC.
What are they called?
The SCOBA, the Council of
Have a
Bishops.
database.
Yeah.
I'll tell you.
Yeah, the Council of Bishops of the U.S. has a database. I think on their website under like mental health providers or something. Okay, any other questions?
Can you maybe post that in the chat, in the Telegram chat?
I can. I'll find it. It'll take me a minute,
That's
as the
okay.
kids said. It'll take me a minute to find it, but I'll get it for you, okay? Husbands, then, are given the more difficult task of loving their wives as Christ loves the church. That means sacrifice. So that love means sacrifice, literally giving up your life for the welfare of your wife. And this, we think, well, this will never happen, but it does happen. It did happen to our ancestors in Russia, where they would go in and kill the husband and let the spouse survive. And as the fathers say, what began in Russia will end in America. So we need to be ready for that. It means making your wife holy through your actions. How does that happen? How does a husband make his wife holy through his actions? Remember what St. Paul said. Making her holy and without blemish.
Start with praying for her.
Okay, so praying for her, yeah. And never encouraging or allowing you, your wife, or your family to do anything that falls under the category of Antichrist. So, if a husband says, let's try this, and you know it's antithetical to the gospel in married life, a wife might say, well, it's my husband, and a husband is not making her holy. If a husband says, I'm really tired, let's stay home today. Or I want to spend money on this and not give it to the church. His wife, out of obedience, might say, okay, let's do that.
And Ananias and Sapphira.
Yeah, exactly right.
Yes.
So a husband needs to lead his wife in all things of their marriage, to lead the family and her toward holiness. He cannot entice, tempt, in any way lead her into sin, because who does that condemnation fall on? On the husband, right? On the husband. Just like if at the church, if I say, all of you come in shorts tomorrow and don't worry about preparing for communion, you all can receive communion. The condemnation's not on you. It's on me. Okay? So his job is to make her holy through his actions. And sometimes that means you have an unhappy wife. But a husband, as the priest of the family, has to say, this is what's best for us. If you love anything more than Christ, your wife will not be holy because her priorities will be upside down. This love means loving your wife with as much love and respect as you show your own body. Would you ever physically abuse yourself? Would you ever mock yourself? Probably not. At least not if you're mentally well. Okay? I know somebody can say, well, I know someone who beat themselves. Okay. Mentally healthy people don't do that. So what does this look like practically? This is why you all came today. This is the money conversation. What does this look like practically, okay? We're going to start with husbands. Husbands are called to lead. Okay? Husbands are called to lead. This involves several things. Establishing a vision for marriage, one that is modeled after Christ, and always striving to put him first in your own life and in the lives of your family members. So, establishing a vision for married life. Now, it'd be good if men could think about this before they get married, because on the one hand, it will help prepare them because they'll be looking for someone that shares that vision, right? That's always hard when you have two separate visions for married life. But the other thing is, it will help them sharpen this vision of living for Christ alone. So in a family, what does this look like? A vision for marriage that's modeled after Christ. What are, anecdotally, by practice, what does this look like in a married family? We talked about a lot of it already. What does it look like? A married life that has as its vision always striving for Christ. Yeah, like in practice, like day to day.
Like Robert works the late shift, so we always call him, and then we do prayers at our house.
Perfect.
Him phoning in.
Prayers daily. Yep. What else? Mary, you said something?
Yeah, we always had dinner. We had meals together.
That's hard when your husband works separately, but you do it when you can, right? And you do it when he's not there. There's an entire rhythm to life that revolves around Christ, right? Christ is the center, and everything we do in a given day revolves around the person of Christ.
Church.
Yep. Church is first. Okay? Not sports, not anything else. What else?
Fasting.
Fasting. Oh yeah, that's the big one. Fasting. I find often if a husband doesn't demand, I'm not saying, I can't believe you cooked that, it's got dairy in it, get rid of it. That's not what I'm saying. But if a husband says, sweetheart, we're in the fast, can you plan some meals that would be fast friendly? And by the way, if you don't know any, here, I got this book from church that lays out some really good fasting recipes. I really would love to try this. What do you think? Can we make that work? Very different conversation. But I often find when families don't fast, the husband's not fasting. When the husband fasts, everyone fasts. When the husband doesn't fast, the wife often fasts, feels bad about it because she feels disrespectful toward her unfaithful husband, doesn't want to impose it on the kids, and what ends up happening is practically not only is she frustrated, but now she's making 2 different meals. This happens all the time. Okay? Happens all the time. So, husbands, you have to be thinking about what's my vision for married life with Christ at the center. So if I were you, I would be sitting down and thinking week to week, okay, most important thing, when is church this week? Sunday, non-negotiable. I have to be there. Literally, unless I'm in the hospital, I'm here. Or super sick. Again, I don't want to, I'm not trying to put too fine a point on it. You know what I mean, all right? Feast days, major feasts, non-negotiable, have to be there. If I have other time during the week when I can attend liturgy, I'll go. And I need to be saying my vigil prayers and my pre-communion prayers. I mean, if you just do this, your entire marriage will be transformed. Just do that. Go to church every Sunday. Come to vigil. Say your pre-communion prayers. Go to the major feasts that the church requires because we're obedient to Christ. And if you've got extra time, go to liturgy during the week. If you can't, go to work and make a living for your family. You do this every week. And I say this to people all the time. Do it for 6 months, it will change your life. People do it for 3 weeks and then they say, I got really tired or something came up or this happened or that happened or I got in a fight or I didn't like this. Okay, do this for 1 year or 6 months. I promise your marriage will be changed. Why? Because suddenly Christ will be at the center. My marriage with Matushka has been significantly changed. Here's what you may not know. When I first came to St. Innocent as a subdeacon and didn't know any better, we had Vespers on Saturday nights at 4 o'clock. At that time, we had 4 young kids. And it was a 37-minute drive for a 29-minute service. And nobody came. Don't laugh, Matushka. Nobody came. Including my own wife and kids didn't come. Because I was told by people that were in charge, like, it's not that big of a deal. Don't worry. Well, it is that big of a deal. And so now, for the last 5 years or 6 or 7 years, every Saturday, short of something remarkable, which does happen, I always tell my kids, you get 2 vigils a year you can miss. Usually that's for homecoming and prom. That's it. We don't miss for anything else. Somebody offered, I think I told you, Isaiah, 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks, somebody said, do you want tickets to the Michigan-Texas football game? I'm like, oh, I really do. But I couldn't have served vigil. Okay? I'll come to you 1 second. But you do this, as we've done, it will change your marriage. It will change your family. My entire family life revolves around not, what are we having for dinner? What event do we have? What sporting event? What this? My whole life revolves around, when are we going to church again? Now, we still work. We still have stuff we have to do. We still have events. But if you do this for 6 months, it'll change your life because this is a vision that a husband can lay out for his family, no ifs, ands, or buts about it, where Christ is first. Yes, go ahead.
This is about a detail, maybe I misheard. Did you say that the service was 29 minutes here? When you were
Used to be Vespers was 29 minutes. Yeah, great Vespers would clip along like this. And it's hard to ask people who live 40 minutes away to drive for a 29-minute service, right? It was, nobody came, right? You remember these days. There were 2 or 3 days.
Are you sure nobody came at that time?
Oh, you'd have 2 people show up to Vespers.
That's so sad.
Yeah. So do this, though. Put your life around the rhythm of the church, which is this is how God wants us to live. Revolve around this, and I promise you, your marriage will change. Second, husbands are called to be the domestic priest. This involves leading prayer at home, so you calling in is fantastic, right? Ensuring it happens. If wives take this role, prayer becomes internally feminized, leading to a destruction of roles not only in the home, but also in the church. You want to know why the Catholic Church has such an influx of girl altar servers and highly feminized church music? Because for 50 years, men didn't pray with their families at home. Who did the praying? Moms did. But when moms raise up Billy and Sally on Shine Jesus Shine, because that appeals to her, that's what you're going to get in the church. Okay? That's why the Catholic Church has a shortage of priests, because there are no young men who want to be priests. Husbands are called to love. This involves ensuring that husbands and wives stay in love, that love never fades or fails, as the scriptures say. Husbands are called to provide. This involves working for the family, providing insofar as you are able for the needs of the family. This means husbands must have a robust work ethic. As noted in the text, meaning the text from Father Josiah, men must die to themselves and the desire to be mothered even as adult men. Some of the marriages I've seen go really badly are men who still want to be mothered. You know, I'm not going to stop playing my video game. Can you bring food down to me? Wake me up. I can't set an alarm. Love you. I can't set an alarm. You got to wake me up when it's time for me to go to work. This happens. Okay? Men have to grow up and can't live as people, grown adults who want to be mothered. Men need to have a deep work ethic. One marriage that I just heard, an Orthodox marriage, one spouse was not, husband was, that just ended, not here, thank God. Every day, the wife went off to work, made $250,000.
Just because I've asked her in the past.
Maybe did her.
Once or twice.
Yeah, that's okay. Yeah. Now you know, right? You didn't know. Knowing is half the battle, as they say. She was making $250,000. He hated to go to work, so what did he do? For the first year of their marriage, he didn't go to work. He also had a bad drinking problem. He didn't take control of it. He got drunk, he hit his wife, and she left him. I'm not saying this would have solved that. What I'm saying is that should be a huge red flag. You're not going to work? Like you're in no way going to support our family? Husbands are called to be faithful friends. This involves being there when everyone else has abandoned her.
I have a question.
Yes.
Since you brought that up, like when sometimes the dad can't find work or gets laid off,
Yeah.
he becomes like, you know.
The FAMI?
I don't know. Is that okay? That's a new
What is
term.
it?
I've never heard of it. I don't know idea, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, yeah.
Like the woman's able to get a job and he can't. Like, is that inherently
No.
disordered?
If it goes on too long, it is. I mean, see, I think the problem is when the husband says, this is really comfortable. My wife is working and I can be at home. Yes, it is inherently disordered. But sometimes that's a stopgap because what other option do you have? Yeah. We've all lost, I think every man in here has probably lost the job, myself included. And you're like, thank God my wife works, but now I got to go find another job. Yeah. And sometimes do things you don't want to do to provide. Yeah.
You know, we're talking about husbands and wives, but I keep thinking about how this impacts the children.
Yeah.
And I think that our children need to know, well, when they're complaining that they don't want to eat this or that, well, your father's out working, so you can have this or that.
Oh, I've used
Let's
that
be
line.
appreciative. Or, I don't like this, Mom. What do you mean? Don't talk to your mother that way. You thank your mother for this
That's
food.
right.
Yeah, you know, this spills into teaching future husbands and wives how to be good husbands
Absolutely.
and wives. So being obedient to Christ becomes obedience for our children. It just keeps circulating back and forth.
It does. I can still remember as a little kid, I tell the story all the time in front of my parents who now deny it, but I promise you it was true. I was probably 6 or 7. And for Christmas, my parents gave me like 5 batting cage tokens to go to the batting cage, which now would cost, what, $7, $8, something like that. And I remember saying to my mom, that's all I got. And my mom went off on, you don't know how hard your father works. My mom was working full-time too. And I'll never forget that, like how even today I still regret that as a young kid. I should have known better, I didn't, and I said something I shouldn't. But like that has always stuck with me about how my parents worked really hard for the little we had. Absolutely. Wives now. Wives are called to be helpmates, assisting, never destroying. This involves supporting her husband and accepting his leadership. This also means that a wife will not attempt to raise her voice and fight with her husband. The greater sin is the husband's, should he do this to his wife, because Christ would never do this to the church. The house, like the church, is not a democracy. So in my house, only if we're joking do we say, let's take a vote. Because usually that means mom gets 2 and dad gets 4 and their votes don't matter. Okay? Like the church, it's not a democracy. We don't vote on things at the church. We don't vote on things at home. What makes this hard is that wives are called to submit to their husbands who are often stupid, arrogant, or downright wrong. Matushka, don't laugh. But a wife's beauty and holiness are increased when she submits nonetheless. So, I'm not talking, and I think it was a really good question, an important question. I'm not talking about when the husband is abusive and you say, thank you, can you yell at me again? That's not what I'm saying. What I am saying is, if the husband decides, we're going to do this, we're going to buy our groceries from Whole Foods this week because we're going to eat organic, not realizing there might be other organic places you can shop, and he spends a little too much, and now your other flexible spending is gone. You don't say, I'm leaving you because you misspent the money. You say, that was dumb, but I love you so much, and let's not do that again. Yes?
You shared an article with me. I don't even know if you remember it, but it was basically addressing women who think they have to do everything because their husbands are stupid. And I thought it was really interesting because you think about the chaos that'll come from, husband or wife doing something wrong, but the article really shed a light on the fact that, it's not like they're stupid and can't learn from mistakes that they make.
Yes.
And then make better choices later on. And by doing all the choice making, you're not allowing them to even rise to the occasion or get any smarter, so you're hindering that. And I just have found that super helpful because I have been previously married and walked into a marriage with kids and he was single. So that definitely put things into perspective to step back and what's the worst that could happen as he, figures it out.
Yeah, and I find, speaking from our own marriage, that often those, that was kind of a foolish choice or just decision. I had far more of those than Matushka. She's way more thoughtful about what fallout could be, for example, on certain decisions. And yet, I don't ever remember a time where she's been like, I can't believe you did that. Now, none of them are earth-shattering, right? You look back and say, I shouldn't have spent my money on that, or I shouldn't have. But I think allowing husbands to make mistakes and then to figure it out and then to grow from it is really important. Because if you try to fix it, you're just mothering them. That's what moms do. Mom fixes everything. This becomes troublesome when husbands show no ability or interest in leading. And this does happen. I mean, I have, throughout my priesthood, heard from lots of people saying, I want my husband to be a leader. He just won't do it. What do I do? One approach is to force their husbands to lead. So you hear things like, fine, if he won't lead, I just won't do anything and we'll see what happens. That's a disaster. Because any good that may be happening already is not going to continue and that all goes away. All right? So the first approach, which is sort of a passive-aggressive approach, if you want to be honest, is not helpful because the entire family falters and often falls away. Another approach is simply to continue leading, meaning the wife, and thus pushing your husband further and further behind. He's not going to lead, I'll continue to lead for him. When this happens, husbands never become the family head that God ordained them to be. So what do? First, talk about it. I think raising the question is an important thing. Now, I have had some people say to me, I raised the question and he doesn't see the problem. Okay, do it again. And do it like 5 or 6 or 7 times and really say, sweetheart, I want you to make the decision. Or I want you to lead, or I really want to follow you. You tell me what we think we should do. gently suggest that you want to be led. Second, pray. Pray to Saints Peter and Fevronia, the patrons of marriage in the Russian Church. Pray to your guardian angel and to his. Pray that God strengthen your husband. And third, do all you can to create opportunities where the husband can lead naturally, without even thinking. This will soon become a habit. So, for example, little things, like if your husband is incapable of making a decision, you know what? Find a time where you can say, sweetheart, I want to go out to dinner and I want you to choose where we're going to go. Now, he, without thinking, may say, I want to go to Buffalo Wild Wings. Right? I want to go out and have a steak. Okay, so he is capable of making decisions. And then you do it with something else, and something else. And suddenly then, when it comes time to make a really big decision, he's built up this equity of, I can make some decisions. But if you're saying, my husband doesn't like to make decisions, I'm going to take him out to dinner and I'm going to plan where we're going to go and do everything a man would normally do, once again, he's not forced to make a decision. Yeah?
You know my favorite part about the man being in charge is children's discipline when they have an attitude.
Put it on them. Yeah.
I love that default.
Yes.
It's been my favorite part of Orthodoxy, I think.
Where the husband has to take care of disciplining.
I send the kids to Robert all the time.
Yep. He's building up strength. That's good. Matushka.
I would add on to that last point, excuse my voice. Part of finding the opportunities for him is looking where you might need to pull back, or where you're overstepping and you're doing too much, or you're doing, and I think honestly that's been one of the hardest parts of Orthodoxy for me, is how often the fathers or the desert fathers or whoever it is say, don't worry so much about the other people, look at yourself, what are you doing wrong? And you go, that's not what the world tells me. I'm supposed to blame everybody else because I'm fine. And it's really, really hard, but it changes everything.
It does. Within a marriage too, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Yep. Wives are called to be homemakers, even if they have to work. And I realize the reality of our world today. This involves keeping an ordered, generally clean home. This involves getting the children in the home to do the necessary work to help with this. All of this involves the wife being the homemaker, children, food, how money is spent in the house. If the husband, who is expected to set the vision for the family and lead the prayers and discipline the children and make sure that this vigil, Sunday, major feast, all of that is followed, is then also expected to make dinner, clean the house, go shopping, and boss the kids around in terms of who's going to vacuum, something's going to fall apart. Okay? So this is super important. Just practically speaking, the woman, this is her domain. This is her safe place. This is where she's in charge. Okay? This does not mean that when he gets home, you have a drink ready and say, honey, sit down, let me rub your feet. That's not what this is saying. This is just saying, you keep things at home operating so he can do the things outside the home, keep them operating, and together, your whole life is operating. Who can find a virtuous wife? Go read this on your own. You've all read it before, Proverbs 31. But it talks about the virtuous wife going out, finding things, buying things, making things, planting a vineyard, going out by lamp at night, gets the stuff that she needs to make things at home, like grocery shopping, those kinds of things. We're going to wrap up this section. We'll save finances for next time. Women are called to love. Now, for men and women, this is different. Women are called, by different I mean because men and women often need different things. Women often need to be thinking about praising their husband because we're in a culture where we demean husbands. Men have things they need to do as well. But here, praising her husband, looking after her husband, counseling her husband. Remember, if you're a husband here, you need a counselor. And your counselor is your wife. She should be able to advise you. So the old, I remember when we went to Matushka's grandparents' funeral, maybe 4 months ago. And Emma was just getting ready to apply for the FAFSA to get financial aid for college. And Matushka's mother, my mother-in-law, said, I remember when I was applying for the FAFSA in 76 or 75. And my dad said, oh, that's the form? And she said, yeah, Dad, what do I put down for your income? He said, no, I'll take care of that. Took the FAFSA form into the other room, wouldn't even let her mother, my wife's grandmother, know what he made and what he put on the FAFSA for his income. Because the culture was, I don't need help with that, I'm the man, I'll take care of that. That's not what this is talking about. What this is talking about is, there are really big questions that men have to answer, and they should be looking to their wives for counsel and advice. I'm looking for a new job. This is what I'm thinking. I went and I looked at it, or I interviewed, or whatever. What do you think? One of the example questions in the book was, what do you do if your husband comes home and says, I quit my job today, we're moving to Texas, and I've got another job lined up, and you're the obedient wife? What do you do? How do you react to that?
Yes, I'm willing.
What's that?
Yes, where do I pack my stuff?
Okay, you're moving to some place with big snakes. Okay? Like, imagine it's not all fun and games. Okay? So there needs to be...
You should say California.
Yeah, right, exactly. San Diego. I find that the more your marriage has a vision for it, centered around Christ, the more these things fall into place. Wives are called... counseling her husband, taming her husband sexually, being interested in her husband, and ensuring he is well cared for, not her. You can tell I was typing quickly. He is well cared for in the home. Wives are called to be the heart of the family. So if the family is the body and the husband is the head, the wife is the heart. Heads and hearts do different things, but you can't live without one or the other. This involves being the very life of the house. All that happens in the home should have the woman's touch and blessing, as it were. Wives are also called to be faithful friends. This involves being there when everyone else has abandoned him. And there will come a time when someone or people close to your husband will abandon him, and the wife has an obligation to be there at that time for her husband. Okay? Any questions about any of this?
What if the husband says, I'm quitting my accounting job, and we're moving to Texas, I always wanted to be a cowboy. I'm going to go look for work there. Is that the same as what you were saying?
Yeah, I would probably say, hey, I wish you would have asked me about this. Like city slickers, Yeah. And I've heard this happen where people are like, oh, I quit and I'm leaving, and I'm, okay. Let me just ask you this one question in here. I found these scenario questions to be very, very good. One, I think the exercise in here about, are there specific jobs that or responsibilities should be the wife's or the husband's or both? I would be curious, I'd be curious to know what you say, but I would also be curious for you guys just to do that exercise and look at what is a husband, taking out the trash. Now, in my house, my kids take out the trash. But cutting the grass, I think my wife has cut the grass one time in 20 years. And it was where I was working a crazy schedule that week, and I was worried it was going to get too long, and like it was fall and it was getting dark early or something like that. Home repair. We had this problem with the HVAC. I didn't say to my wife, can you get something scheduled and get somebody out here? I said to her, hey, we got a problem. I scheduled this guy, he's coming Saturday morning between 8 and 11, and I'll be here thinking, I don't want her to get taken advantage of, right? So, but, good one might be dispute with neighbors. You got a dispute with your neighbor. Who's going to talk to the neighbor? Isaiah, probably. But this question I think is good. Let's maybe end with this. A wife is finding herself overwhelmed with managing her responsibilities. She's working on an online degree, taking care of the home, and raising 2 children. She begins to feel that she is drowning and can't keep herself from calling her husband repeatedly at the office, asking him to come home and help her with tasks. The husband asks her to please not call him repeatedly at the office because it's compromising his work and displeasing his employer. The wife feels that he is being insensitive to her predicament. How could the couple move forward to a resolution of this difficulty in a healthy way? What do you think? So you got 2 problems, right? She's overwhelmed, and he's not being sensitive.
I'm curious to know why she'd be working on an online degree with 2 children at that moment. It seems like that would be compromising her ability as a mother, and you're not making money at the time. I mean, I know people need to get degrees to make
Yep.
money, but there is a time and a place for that, and I just don't think it's always easy to discern patience and waiting till a more appropriate time when you want to like accomplish a goal.
Yep. So maybe there's not a clear vision in the family for where we're going and what the responsibilities are in terms of, am I expecting my wife to go out and work? Does she need a degree to do that? But let's presume that, let's presume this is not something difficult. It's taking some time. But it's not like she's lying awake all night and can't sleep. But in the moment, she's frustrated and concerned and wondering why she's doing all of this on her own. What would you advise this couple to do?
To go on a date.
Go on a date?
Okay?
Yeah, because if this is happening, they must not be communicating very well, which means they need to focus on strengthening their marriage.
Okay? Yep. I don't disagree. Yep.
I'm reading between the lines.
You are, but that's okay. Yeah?
No offense, Father, it sounds like a man created this scenario. But I'm.
How would you rewrite it? I'd be
Well,
curious.
Something that addresses the fact that she's connected with other spiritual women. This is a young sister, older sister, mom, daughter scenario. This was me. Not all of this.
Yeah.
But this was my mother explaining the need for structure, routine, or Ted's in school and working.
Yeah.
You take care of all this laundry, or you let him do what he needs to do.
Yep.
Because that's what you need to become in him for your future.
Yeah.
Share should be. So why
I
don't we
don't
say no one else is around? They moved to a new town. There is no one else. Okay, maybe that.
Yep. Because in an ideal world, the wife would say, I'm super overwhelmed. I'm going to call my mom or my mother-in-law or my sister and say, hey, listen, I know this is a big ask, but can you take my kids for an hour so I can get something done?
That and mom or big sis would say, well, why are you taking this online class
Yeah.
right now? Shouldn't you be? And your kids are 1 and 2.
Yep.
And so, yeah, I think.
So, but we can't just suggest, we wouldn't suggest to her, well, you need to just call your mom. So in this moment, she's calling, he's saying, you gotta stop calling because my boss is getting mad. How do they resolve it or push it off at least so it's not an issue in this moment?
Well, maybe he can reassure her that we will address this as soon as we'll get the kids something quick, get them in bed, let's you and I talk.
Yep.
And that maybe gives him time to think about how to cut some of the emotional exhaustion. She can think about the fact, if his boss is getting annoyed and I'm contributing to that.
Yep.
Yeah, maybe.
And if he's supposed to lead, then he has to lead them out of these murky waters somehow. And it might be that, as you said, he reassures her, I promise you when I get home, I'll help. If you can't do it all right now, don't worry. I'm not going to be mad. And I'll get home and I'll help you. And then when we can both take a deep breath, let's talk about a better way forward. Because obviously, the expectations are too high, or you really do have too much going on, but I'm going to help you.
My husband asked me, honey, don't you have enough right now without worrying about working too?
Yeah.
Like, that melted my heart.
Right.
Because he said, you have enough, like you don't need to take on this too. And that was reassuring.
It is, and I think just to put one final point on it, this is helpful, is sadly in today's world, it's very hard for one spouse to be home full time. Nearly impossible. Yeah. Now with just gas and eggs and all of that, it's impossible. So It's a blessing when it can be done that way, and all the more reason then to use that time for these things when you've got that luxury. But I totally agree with you. There needs to be a plan, and he has to help facilitate the plan. He needs to help facilitate that plan. But in the moment, getting angry or frustrated or yelling or don't call me back is probably not the solution. It's, I'm going to help you when I get home, I promise. Do what you need to do to survive the next 4 hours, and when I get home, we'll take care of it.
Order chicken nuggets.
Whatever you got to do. Yep. Exactly right. Yeah.
During commercials, we'll talk.
I can give you my drink, then we'll have a conversation. No. Don't, Ted, no. Okay, so we'll do finances next time. We are not going to meet on the 19th because there's a baby shower that day.
Bridal shower.
I'm sorry. Hopefully no baby shower. That'd be a little out of order. Okay, bridal shower that day. And so we will meet, I'm going to look at the calendar, but probably the next week, the 26th, I think it would be.
Isn't that the wedding? Oh, Saturday. Well,
Saturday, no. Yes, that is the day before the wedding. We'll see. It'll either be that weekend or the next weekend. Okay? But we'll figure it out as we get close. All right? All right. Any questions before we go? All right, let's stand and pray, okay? It is truly meet to bless thee, the Theotokos, ever blessed and most pure, and the mother of our God, more honorable than the cherubim, and beyond compare more glorious than the seraphim, who without corruption gave us birth to God, the Word, the very Theotokos, thee do we magnify. Through the prayers of our holy fathers, O Lord Jesus Christ our God, have mercy on us and save us. Amen. Okay, God bless you, all right?